I wish that this existed when I was starting out in sports, or even like when I was with the Cubs and at, the director level in the Dodgers. Like, I wish this existed when I was working for teams. And I was like, oh, well, it doesn't exist now. I'm just going to do it. It's a podcast. So how hard can it be? Famous last words.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here.
So I'm obviously not Jahaan. I'm Stephani, her editor and co-producer for Game of Her Own. Jahaan and I go way back to 2011 when she hired me to be a Wrigley Field ambassador for the Chicago Cubs. While neither of us work for the Cubs anymore, we've remained friends, and I was so honored when she asked me to be a part of this podcast. I'm here now because after 99 episodes, I have some questions. To celebrate the 100th episode of Game of Her Own, I'm interviewing Jahaan and covering things like the consulting side of her business, what she does at the Super Bowl, why she started this podcast in the first place, who she gets nervous to interview, her dream guests, and advice for starting your own business or podcast. Jahaan has been such an important part of my career, and it's truly been my pleasure to help her be a part of yours. All right, Game of Her Own listeners, let's do this. Jahaan, welcome. We're so glad that you're here.
This is really strange.
I wanted to do it kind of like you do so that you could be on the receiving end. How does it feel?
It feels really different, and I like to have control. So I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do over the next 45 minutes to an hour.
And you have no idea what I'm going to ask you either, which is even better.
I really don't. I really don't. And that's also scary, but I'm ready for it. So this isn't my first time being on this side of the mic. So I'm excited.
Well, let's get into it. So we're celebrating your 100th episode today. And just so you know, that's over 3,900 minutes of podcasting that you've done. When you break it down like that, it sounds a little bit crazy, right?
3,900?
Yeah, it's probably more than that too, because I was only able to count up to like episode 98 since we're recording this a couple weeks early. But yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
All
congratulations to us.
Right. Okay. So you always start your podcast with the question, when did you first fall in love with sports? You answered that on episode 25 when Hannah Basinger interviewed you. So to stay on that theme, I want to ask you when you first fell in love with working in sports.
Ooh, good question. Okay, really, you guys, I had no idea what the questions are. And just so we all are aware that Stephani said she was going to send me some this weekend and she didn't. So that scares me even more. So here we go. I am not prepared anything for this episode, but I know this answer to this question. I was in college when I realized I wanted to work in sports. And then it was really because of the Red Sox. And I don't know if it was a combination of sports, competitiveness, working in sports, being competitive, and just my love for sports and not wanting to be in finance. Not that anyone should pay me in the finance world, or just working in an office with no excitement and no energy. And so that first day, I remember when I got my key that let me in Fenway Park, I was like, oh, this is I remember they were test it, see if it works. And I was like, I feel like someone should be recording this. This is a huge moment. The person who was training us that day, they were just check it, see if it works. In my head, I was like, oh my God, this is a moment. I had theme music playing in my head. It was so exciting to go inside. And I remember thinking there was one time when we had to work a doubleheader and I was not happy about it because it was a long day. And I was like, this is not for me. I don't know that I want to do this. This is too long of hours. And I don't know what happened because over the course of the year, it all changed. I always wanted to be at work and I just loved it. And I think it all had to do with the people.
Do you think that it maybe stemmed from always wanting to have a job that you considered fun? Because I was always like that. I always wanted a job that I thought was fun. And my parents were like, sometimes you just can't have a job that's fun. Sometimes you just need a job to have a job. Do you think that working in sports for you is kind of along that track? Like it is a fun job for you?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was fun when I had to work the doubleheader. It wasn't quite fun yet. So still trying to like find my way and like figure out like what I was going to do. And it was in the very, very beginning. So like, I'm talking like a couple months in. So I think for me, it was fun and I got paid, not well, but I was paid. And I was like, oh, this is fun. At that age, there's a certain level of validation that you get you get it at any age. But for me, I felt like you got a job at the Red Sox. Like that's, you know what I mean? That's incredible. Yeah. And so like, my identity became tied around it, but yes, it was fun. But then I also felt like I was very successful from the time, like I started working in sports. Like I got in and then I kept growing in that position, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And it's extremely valid. Like if you're successful and you're having fun doing something, like, of course you're going to want to keep doing it.
Yeah. It was definitely a good time. And the people I got hired with, 25 ambassadors, that made it so much fun. So they like became my family. Like one person even officiated my wedding years and years later. So, I was like in my 20s when I started and I didn't get married to my late 30s, to put that into perspective.
And you hired me at the Cubs as an ambassador. And here we are today.
I know. It's crazy, so crazy.
Right?
Yeah, it's so crazy.
Okay, so you've talked a lot about the coaching side of your business on this podcast, but you also have a consulting side of your business that we don't necessarily hear a lot about, and probably because the consulting side has been less because of COVID. But what does that entail? Like, what do you do on the consulting side of your business?
So I work with sports and entertainment organizations to help align their frontline staff to their brand promise. So what does that really mean? So if I'm working with a sports team and they have, your ushers, ticket takers, food and beverage staff, I help make sure that whatever message that the genius, marketing folks came up with, I make sure that the frontline staff can execute on that.
Can you say more about that? Like, give us an example.
Well, you like my PR answer? Okay. So going deeper into that, I got to do some work with the Braves. Just thinking about, they have a great brand. They have a great organization where they all feel like family. And so they just wanted to dust off their customer service philosophy, their customer service brand, and make sure that all of the different entities that make up the fan experience were also living up to that brand. So they have a lot of third-party vendors. And so how do you take all of those and kind of welcome them in to the family and make sure they're part of the family? And it's just not something that's talked about. It's something that's operationalized and executed upon. And then when you think about it on the entertainment side, I work with brand experience agencies. What I love about working with my brand experience work is that the agencies are phenomenal at what they pull off. They have all these brand activations and they bring things to life and they're so huge and there's so much work that goes into it, but they have to bring staff to bring it to life. That's where they're like, we can train people, but when we're training people beyond samplers and people who pass out t-shirts, that's out of our zone of genius. That's out of our area of expertise. Yes, we can get it done, but by me coming in, brand experience agencies are usually really lean. So by bringing me in, it frees up time for their event producers to do what they do well. And then I get to have fun, manage. I don't have a staffing agency because I don't want that. But I get to bring in a staffing agency that I trust. I have one that I love, bring them in. We come up with I create the training manual, the training program, how we're going to make brand ambassadors care about a brand that they're only working for a limited amount of time. And I love the challenge of doing that. And so they hire me and they bring me on to do it. And then I have contractors that work for me that help with the training and help with managing all the logistics.
I'm going to use one of your terms. That sounds like a pretty big job.
Yes, it is. It is. And it is time consuming. With COVID, it was devastating. just to watch all of my clients and then me go through this period of you can't do anything. You can't execute on it. There's no reason to train people. There's no reason to create this strategic training program if you can't go out and do anything. So we were all like on pause, like the rest of the world.
So you just wrapped up working another Super Bowl. We're recording this before the Super Bowl, but when this airs, you'll have just wrapped up working another Super Bowl. What exactly does that entail? I know you say a lot, yeah, I'm going to work at the Super Bowl. I'm doing this at the Super Bowl. And you kind of just touched a little bit on what you do on your consulting side, but what do you do at the Super Bowl?
Good question. I do keep it really high level. And the reason I do is just when you think about it, like the work I'm doing for my clients is for my clients. I just try to keep a certain level of privacy. And although a lot of this is public facing, I get in, do my work, and then I move on. For coaching, I talk about things that happened inside that world, but I kind of take out the players and I don't talk about I never say anyone's name. To answer your question, I don't know if you've ever been to a Super Bowl, Stephanie, or if anyone's listening has been to a Super Bowl. Have you been to a Super Bowl?
I have not.
I feel like I would know if you've been to a Super Bowl.
I think so too.
There are so many partners and vendors who are a part of putting this event on. Everything looks completely different than what it does on a normal game day. And some of these stadiums are already so impressive, like SoFi Stadium is so impressive, but it's going to look different. How you get in, all the events that are taking place. It's insane what happens, the build out that happens for Super Bowl. And so for me, my job is working on the exterior fan experience. So thinking about when people park their cars and then what's the experience that they go through from the time they park their car and get all the way to the stadium. Now, for a normal game, it would be just a walk. You'd walk from your car to the stadium. That would be it. Well, depending on the venue. But for this particular great, ridiculous event, there's so many parties that take place, like big, huge private parties, like that's on campus. There's a big like plaza for all the fans. So there's so many things to do. So how do we make sure that while they're waiting for the game to start and hanging out and having fun, how do we make sure that side of the experience is just as good as when they get inside?
That sounds really fun. I've been to like outside of Super Bowl stuff. When I lived in Phoenix, they had the Super Bowl there, and it was like days and days before of just like activities and parties, like everything that you're talking about. So that's the stuff that you work on?
That's the stuff that I work on with my staff. So think about, how do you get to those events? So it's a whole new campus. So even if you are now with the Rams playing at their home, field, there's
which is so cool, by the way.
Right. 2 years in a row, this is happening. So if you're a Rams fan and you're coming to the Super Bowl, if you're lucky enough to be going to the Super Bowl, you're going to get there and be like, oh, there's all these different events. Like, where do I go? I'm supposed to go to this private party. I also want to check out all the music and live music on a stage that's happening in the fan plaza area. Like, how do I where do I go? What do I do? Like, I have 1,000 questions. Who can I ask? That's where my staff comes in. So we have 200 people. And I should say that when I say my staff, I am brought in by a company called PPW. I had their vice president of event coordination on, Meg Madden, episode number 2, right?
She was in the first few. I'll link it in the show notes.
Yes. Oh, nice. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. So Meg Madden, so she's my client and I go help her. So we bring on 200 to 250 wayfinders, we call them, and they are there to provide guest services and help fans get to wherever they need to go and make sure they have the information that they need to have a fantastic experience at Super Bowl. And
don't you get to drive around in a golf cart too?
I do get to drive around the golf cart until game day, and then they make us all put them away. But that is actually fun. And one of my first, was it my first? I think it was my first when I was in Arizona or Houston. I needed to go backwards. I needed to reverse. And I put my arm over the seat next to me and looked back and stepped on the gas and went straight into the fence. I never put the car or the golf cart into reverse. Like, I don't know. Like, I was so in the zone and I was like relatively new. And so I was just like, a little like, oh, I got to do my job and I got to get here. And Meg needs me to do something. And yep, drove into a fence.
I would have paid money to see that. Just saying.
It was not fun. Luckily, I didn't do any damage and I kind of just took off real quick.
And you were okay. That's always a plus.
Yes, I was okay.
So your business is consulting and coaching, and it just started with the consulting, right? Coaching came later.
Yes. Yeah, correct.
Okay. So when you were getting into the consulting side of things, did you have a goal or something in mind before you were able to make that jump to start your own business? Was it like a certain amount of money? Was it a number of clients? Were you doing it as a side hustle while you were still working full time? Like, walk us through that process.
You know what I learned about myself is I can't do a side hustle. I do recommend it if it's for you, but it is not for everybody. I have to go all in, at least where I am now and where I was 5 years ago. I need to be all in. And so I said to myself, I was at Deloitte, and I think people have heard me talk about Deloitte, great organization. It wasn't the right fit for me. That corporate structure is not for me, but it is a great place to work. So I said to myself, I can leave. I just need to find my first client. And so I had been thinking about starting my own business for a while. I didn't quite know what it was going to look like. I was going to have a team. I wasn't sure, but I knew I could do the work. I knew I could make at a minimum the salary that I was making at Deloitte. If not Deloitte, then definitely at the Cubs, right? Because sports, we all know sports. Yeah.
I know what I got paid there.
I wish you guys can see Stephanie's face. So I knew at the very least, I would be able to make that same sort of salary, even if some of my work was contract work and some of my work was consulting work where they really wanted me to come in and live and be a part of their organization.
This is a question that you're going to start asking guests coming up in the future, because we've talked about this behind the scenes. But what is your favorite failure from having your own business?
Oh, I thought you were going to say with a sports team, because I was like, I'm ready. Oh, this is such a good question. And I need to be vulnerable to give you the truth. So I'm going to say it. So I think what I've recently learned is it's like I've been in the search for certainty, if you will. Mm-hmm. And, for me, that meant who can I partner with to help me, whether it's a PR expertise or somebody to do my content, right? There's so many shiny objects out there that and you have this business and you want your business to succeed. And consulting is very easy for me to get my name out there because I can only take 1 or 2 clients and I have such a strong network. So consulting side is really easy for me to bring in the work. What's difficult is getting the word out that I exist to women who work in sports for coaching. So to answer your question, because I'm a storyteller, so I started to go down a path, but I will come back and land the plane. I think that the hardest part for me was realizing you don't need anybody else's expertise because you are the expert when it comes to coaching. You don't need some, fancy PR person, because the work that I've received from other people has been, I hate to say this, I hope they don't listen, underwhelming. And not because they didn't deliver, but because I'm like, why didn't I do that? So
then you're spending money on something that you could have done yourself.
Yes, that's been the hardest part, because the people I've worked with are wonderful human beings, but they everything they do is sort of turnkey, and I don't do well. You cannot put me into a box. I do not do well with one size fits all. It does not work for me. And so that's my coaching style is the same way. And I think that limits me in terms of scale, because I don't do a one size fits all. I don't do turnkey. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think the one thing that I really enjoyed is my business coach. And she thinks differently than I do. That is the only person who I've continued to do work for or do work with. And she's expensive, but it's worth it, right? Because she's bringing something.
Right.
The people who are affordable have just brought me the turnkey stuff. Natalie, my business coach, is not turnkey, not even a little bit. And so she's a strategic thinker, and she can help me get out of my own way and then come up with a strategic plan, which I think I love her because we have the same exact coaching style. It's the same thing I do with my clients. It's very, how can I help you? Let me help you get out of your way. Okay, you see it now. You see what I see. You see how fabulous you are. Okay, here's the plan. This is what you're going to do to move forward, right? And we come up with it together.
And even your group coaching is very individualized. You have a group coaching program, but it is so specific to that person. Definitely not turnkey at all.
Yeah, it's why I can't take more than 15 clients in the group coaching program. It's funny, Natalie has mastered it because she has up to 100 in her group coaching program. First,
Wow.
I was one-on-one with her, and then I moved into the group coaching program, and she's up to 100. But I have never felt like there's 100 people there. We live in a Facebook group, and I said to somebody who's coming to Chicago, watch out for falling ice. And Natalie's like, what's falling ice? Like, she's like, you know what I mean? Like, so she's commenting on things that there's all these people asking questions, and she still takes the time to get to know somebody and like wants to just really for it to be a community. And I think she's like me. One of my values is connection. And I say hers is the same.
I'll brag on you for a second because I've never been in your group coaching program, but I've seen all the behind the stuff work that goes into it. And you are very much like that, very individualized and want to get to know each person on a personal and professional level.
Yeah, it means so much. I don't know how to talk. Like, I don't know how to help and support you if we haven't made some sort of connection. If I don't know who you are and what goals you want to accomplish. And one of the best compliments I received from a client who signed up during our 20-minute free call. And if you're listening, does not mean you have to do that. Don't be nervous. Have a call with me to see if it's a fit. But this woman signed up immediately. We actually had an hour call because we connected so well. And she was like, let's do this. You're the only one I've talked to who actually has been interested in me, not just my money. I was like, oh, it was such a big compliment that I kind of was like, oh, thank you. But after I got the phone, I was like, oh my God, like, okay, like it's working. It makes sense.
And if you're interested in Jahaan's group coaching program, there just so happens to be a link in the show notes.
Hey, Game of Her Own listeners, it is back. I'm talking about the Be Seen and Heard at Work group coaching experience. I'm talking about the program that will help you level up in your career. Women have joined this program because they have felt defeated, not being able to move their career to the next level. They have felt emotionally drained because they are stuck. They have felt frustrated because they are not seen and heard at work. They are done with not growing in their careers and refuse to continue to let it negatively impact their personal lives. In our group coaching program, you will build a strong executive presence, learn how to advocate for yourself without feeling like you're bragging, quiet the self-doubt that holds you back, and be the change agent that uses their voice and speaks truth to power. If you want early access to this program, join the waiting list. It is that simple. Scroll down to the bottom of the show notes to where it says join the Be Seen and Heard waiting list. Click it. It takes legit less than 30 seconds to sign up. All right, friends, back to why you're really here.
So we've gone over your business a little bit, and now I want to get into your podcast because this is my area of expertise. Why did you start Game of Her Own in the first place?
You know, I feel like this episode is all about Natalie Ekdahl, my business coach, but I'll take you back to like 2017 or 16, was driving to Florida, and actually we're driving home from Florida. We were there for 3 weeks. My husband and I do not do well in cold weather. Y'all, we're having a really hard time this winter. Yes.
I'm currently in Florida.
You guys, she's in Florida. I don't even want to hear it. I hate her Instagram when she's in Florida. I hate like all the time. So we don't do well in the cold, and we try to get out of town for, last year was 2 months. Like we keep increasing the amount of time, but everyone got wind of this lifestyle when COVID hit and decided to try it. And now all the prices are up. So we stayed home because we're going to LA for 3 weeks starting tomorrow. So the answer to your question, we're driving back from Florida, and I was driving. So that means I get control of the radio. I decided to put on a podcast, and the podcast said, it gave me like a recommendation at the end. Like, you could scroll through or whatever. And I was like, this is Natalie Biz Chick. So I'm like, all right, let me give it a try. And it's really hard. That's why I'm so honored when people listen to my podcast week after week. It is hard to find. There's so many podcasts out there, but to find a podcast that you truly enjoy and you feel like you connect with the host, even though you don't know them, is difficult. So I was listening to her the whole drive back from Florida, and then my husband switched and he started driving. He's like, we can still listen to it. I like her. My husband's not into like that sort of stuff. And so he enjoyed it. So I listened to her for actually a whole year. And I remember saying to myself, gosh, this is great. I'm getting all these like tips and insights into being an entrepreneur. It is hard out there. Yes, you can start your own business, but there's the things that people don't talk about, and she talks about them. I wish that this existed when I was starting out in sports, or even like when I was with the Cubs and at, the director level in the Dodgers. Like, I wish this existed when I was working for teams. And I was like, oh, well, it doesn't exist now. I'm just going to do it. It's a podcast. So how hard can it be? Famous last words, by the way. And then we went and got tacos and margaritas. I remember doing that because the next day I had a call and I was not okay. And like, I only had like 3 margaritas. I think that was the beginning of the end of my tolerance, but that's when I decided to start it. And then I was so busy with consulting. It took a whole year before I actually did it. Like, I had to shelf fix. Making money was the priority then. And so I was like, now is not the time, because I'm not going to talk about consulting. That's not it. So the idea started before I even started coaching.
And luckily you had a previous employee that worked in radio and podcasting that could help you with it.
Yes, I got very lucky in that sense, because again, connection's important to me. And if I found someone I didn't know and had to build that trust, I don't know that I would have started the podcast. I think that, and don't go raise your rates when I say that, but I think that
my head is just getting bigger and bigger as you're talking. No.
There's that comfort level. And for me, I knew I was starting something new. I'm putting myself out there. I'm super vulnerable. So I can't handle having a partner, an editor in the podcast world that I don't know. That wouldn't work. Someone has to be able to deal with okay, I'm going to have this done tomorrow. And then I go to do it. I go, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. How do I even do a generic intro? Like the first one I wrote or did, you were like, okay, so that was good. And maybe like do this, this, and this. And so I was like, okay, good. Because who knows what a stranger would have given me, right? Like they could have been like, great, that's it. And they can just have been like very turnkey and like, you give me the file, we just produce it, or we just put it all together. No feedback. I don't know.
And since we have that personal relationship too, it's like, I obviously want to see you succeed too. So this is something that's personal for me.
Are we having a moment?
Sure. Okay, so next question. Out of the 74 guests you've interviewed so far, there have definitely been a lot of memorable moments for me when I've been editing. And one in particular, I remember Pam Ken telling us about how she was offered $35,000 less than a male counterpart and how she handled that situation. And it was just such a standout moment in this podcast for me, because I was like, I can't even believe that happened. And then when I went to go on and get a job, I was able to negotiate better and remembered that in my head as I was looking for jobs. So what lesson or piece of advice has stuck with you from one of your guests after 99 episodes?
It's really hard to answer that question. I will say this. Every single guest I've had, I didn't realize the growth that I was going to get out of having all these guests. I was thinking about all of the women out there who could use support. I was thinking about the old version of me who used to work for teens and like how much this would support and help them. So I think that every single person, every time I have an episode, I'm like, this is therapeutic. This helps me too. And I did not realize those benefits.
How many times have you recorded a podcast and then I've gone to edit it and I text you, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they said this. This was so good.
Yes. Or I get off, I'm done. And I'm like, oh my God, that was so good. Did everything recorded right? Like, is everything okay? Like I start to freak out because I was like, please don't let this be the one that something goes wrong. Like, because that was so good. So everybody has something different and unique. So I think it's really almost impossible to answer your question. I think that Pam Ken.
I can link it in the show notes.
Okay, good. I loved her take on it's not her take, it's her. She is just honest, real, candid, and she has always been herself. So I've had the pleasure of knowing her, right? We started around this, somewhat around the same time. So she was just so authentic. And it's sometimes when I worked in organizations, it was hard for me to practice authenticity. I mean, it's hard now sometimes with clients, consulting and contract clients, not coaching. So I think Pam's was just a great reminder of how to keep it real. I think the other one I'll say is, I'm going to generalize here. This is something I've always wanted to say, but I haven't quite figured out how to put it on social media. And then I forget, and then I never do. It's Black History Month. Maybe I'll do it this year. It's all of the Black women that I've had on, because every time I have them on, I'm nervous. I'm extra nervous. Right?
Yeah.
I'm just a nervous, anxious person. So it is what it is. Like I push through and I do it. But it took a while for me to get there, just so y'all know. It's sort of work I do with my clients. But I would get extra nervous when talking to Black women when I first started, because it was Melissa Proctor. When I interviewed her, the chief marketing officer for the Atlanta Hawks, I was freaking out because people like Melissa didn't exist. Women of color with a C before their name didn't exist, or just a VP. Women, period, actually. And it's so scary because when I say this, I feel old, but it was close to 20 years ago when I started.
I was going to say, it really wasn't that long ago.
No, it doesn't. It sure doesn't feel like that long ago. So I used to remember just women in general weren't in positions, like weren't in leadership positions. As a result, when I started this podcast, I made sure I wanted to do directors and above. And that's not slighting people who are below that. It's just directors and above that didn't exist. And when you see it, you can be it. So I wanted to do the same. And so now we're seeing it more often. Okay, can you tell us your journey? Tell us the story. How'd you get there? Like, how'd you do that? Right? Like, how are you a CMO and you have dreads? Like, did you always have dreads, or did you like one day sneak in and like you had dreads? Like, and I'm talking again about Melissa Proctor, but those feel really personal and special to me.
And their stories are so incredible. Everyone on this podcast, every time I hear people's stories, I'm just like, I can't believe it.
Yes, they help normalize everything that we're going through. I think one of the biggest compliments I've ever received is from somebody who works in government.
Oh, wow.
And they go, so I know this podcast is for, women in sports. And just let me pause here and say, this podcast is for everybody. However you identify, wherever you work, I gear it towards women in sports. But what I'm finding is that it speaks to other people.
I can attest to that because I don't work in sports anymore. And I have found so many great bits of information and advice from this podcast to help me in my career journey. And again, I don't work in sports anymore.
Yeah. So in this person, they work in government and they used to work in sports. They said it's male dominated here. All of the things that I'm hearing in your podcast has been super helpful. I've been binge listening, which makes me think back to Natalie's, like when I was binge listening.
So we obviously know your first favorite podcast is Game of Her Own. Your second favorite podcast is my true crime podcast, If the Walls Could Talk. And I'm curious what your third favorite podcast is. Yes, that was a shameless plug.
Yes. And you should link to it in the show notes. You guys, you definitely should listen to it. What was the question? I'm sorry.
What's your third favorite podcast?
My third favorite podcast is a tie between Brene Brown's Unlocking Us and Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. Those both are so insightful. And I really do love her work. I've loved her work since her TED Talk. Oh, gosh, that must have been back in 2010, 2011. So her very first TED Talk and her second one. I have followed her and done everything, read every book. It speaks to me. Again, you got to find someone that speaks to you. And I kind of latched on. So I hope I never see her in person because I think I might like start crying or do something because her work has been so influential on my work and my personal life as well.
I feel that way about Taylor Swift, and I met her and I didn't freak out. So I think you'd be okay.
Stop. Okay.
All right. Speaking of people that you admire, who would be your dream guest for Game of Her Own?
So there's a couple. What's funny is for me, everyone talks about manifesting and putting it out there. For me, sometimes I'm like, I don't even want to put it out there because if it never happens.
You have told me on numerous occasions not to do that. So take your own advice here.
Oh, I know. I can't even believe I just told you guys that, but I like to be honest and vulnerable with all of you. So Cint Marshall is the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks. And I think I got a little intimidated when I saw her on the Today Show and Hoda Kotb interviewed her. And I was like, damn it, Hoda, I wanted to interview her. Not that we're in competition, nor do Hoda and I know each other. But for some reason, I was like a little mad. And then I watched it. It was really good. And I was like, okay, I can still do a podcast because I would ask many more questions. But she's on my list. And then, okay, this is out of sports, you guys. Bose St. John. She is the CMO of Netflix.
Oh.
And she's been at Apple. She's been at Uber. Bose St. John is just a powerhouse. And so while she's not in sports, man, would I love to have her and Cint Marshall, 2 different episodes on this podcast.
Maybe we can make that happen.
Ooh,
my new job. My new job is a booking producer for a news network. I've got a little more connections than I used to. So
the 2 people. So they are on my list.
Most podcasts don't make it past episode 6. Now, I don't know if that's a true fact, but I read that a while ago and I think it's probably true because I feel like a lot of people start a podcast and then realize how much work it is. And then they're like, bye, I'm out of here. But did you have a moment when you wanted to quit the podcast?
No,
Really?
Not even a little bit. No, I think I had a moment where I was like, girl, you cannot make this process so long. Right. So like in the beginning, it was fine, but like I had to let go as work started to pick up and the world started to open up again. I was like, you can't spend as much time as you are on this podcast. You have to put your trust in Stephani and let her edit it. And you don't have to listen to it. Right. So you can listen to certain episodes and like audits, if you will, but like you need to move on because that would take up a lot of my time. So I would do that on Sundays and then put so much effort into the description. And now I can do it in my sleep. And I actually write the descriptions, like what you see in the show notes, what you see on Instagram. I actually can write it while I'm talking to the guest because it actually helps me form questions. They'll say something and I'm like, oh, people are going to know why she was, in such a dark place. And then like, I'll use it as a question. I've gotten a lot better at it. I've never thought once about quitting. Like that was never on my radar.
So there'll definitely be 100 more.
Yeah, I don't know about that. That's 2 years. I don't know what will happen. I was talking to another podcast host, Deanna Witter. We'll link to her episode. She asked me what the end game was. And I was like, I've been thinking about it and I don't know that I have an answer yet, but I'm okay with just continuing to do it while it makes sense and while it's helping people.
So if someone else wanted to start a podcast, what advice would you give to them?
To call you?
I can put my phone number in the show notes if you want. I'm kidding.
Literally, that's it. Anybody who asks me, I'm like, just go to Stephani. You got to think about why you're doing it. Some people have podcasts and they produce stuff like once a month and they do them. I'm by no means a podcast expert, but I will tell you this, you got to do what feels right to you. And if it makes sense, do it. You don't have to have all the best equipment. You don't have to have like everything planned out. Some plan, but you don't have to have everything planned out. That's, I think, is the most important thing is just going for it and being okay with growing. Last thing I'll say about that is we'll link in the show notes to Brene Brown's podcast episode on first times. It's first fucking times, FFTs. And I'm not kidding you. That is literally what it stands for. And it is great to help you. I wish that I heard that before I started the podcast. It validated a lot. It helped me like think, oh, I wasn't messed up when I was doing that. Oh, it wasn't me. This is what we all go through when you start something new.
And I think one of the things that I told you when we started was the best thing about podcasting is that there really aren't that many rules. There are really no rules. You can do whatever you want and whatever works for you and whatever makes sense for you, and we'll make it work.
You said that to me. And I remember thinking to you, I do better with like guidelines. It was, for me, the uncertainty made it difficult. And not knowing like how many listeners you're going to get. That's one thing I've learned as well. It does not matter. Don't think about your numbers when it comes to downloads. Think about the impact that you're having. And that for me has been super, super helpful.
All right, Jahaan, this is probably going to be my favorite question to ask you because of the way that you always ask it to guests. And it's going to be, are you ready for the rapid fire questions?
I was so scared. I was like, what do I do? What do I ask? Yes, I am ready.
So the fun part about these rapid fire questions is that I came up with different ones so that you don't know what they are.
No.
You have to be under the pressure that your guests are under.
That is fair. Go on.
12 questions. First thing that comes to your mind. First question. What is your favorite sport to watch?
Women's soccer, for sure. Unfortunately, that's not always televised. So then after that, I'd say football. And I'm more of it's very strange. Like I love on Sundays and Saturdays for college football, I love the noise of the game. So sometimes I'm not even watching the game. I just love to hear the noise and the yelling. And if it's a close game, I'll pay attention. Or if it's a team I care about, I'll pay attention. But I would say women's soccer first and foremost, always. When they start to televise more of their games, then I can watch more. But until they get with it, and we all know who I'm talking about when I say they, it's football, just college football and NFL.
What is your absolute number one biggest pet peeve?
Oh my God. I can't take tapping.
But you do it when you are recording podcasts.
Yes, I can take my own. It's not when I do it, it's fine. It's when like my husband does it, like he was twirling the the TV remote while we were watching TV. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why do you have to twirl this remote? It's making so much noise. I hate repetitive little noises. I'm sure you've heard me yell at ambassadors in a very kind and caring way. Just knock it off.
I think I have heard that definitely before. Okay. What is the most interesting thing that you have in your purse?
Oh my God. Interesting? I don't know that it's so heavy and so big.
That is a huge purse. You guys, it is basically a suitcase.
It's so big. The most interesting thing I have in here, I'm going to go with Mindy Kaling's new book, Why Not Me? I don't know why I'm showing you. Like, you don't need to see it. You know, I would say it's the most interesting thing that's in there right now.
But that also proves how big your purse is, because if your purse is big enough to have a book in it, then you're basically carrying around a small suitcase.
I have so many things in that thing.
Okay. What chore do you hate doing?
I don't do the dishes or take out the trash.
I hate unloading the dishwasher. That is like the worst thing for me.
It's just so like tedious. And Scott likes to do it. I don't know if it's an OCD thing, but I literally sometimes like I put a plate down and I'm like cooking and like he puts the plate in the dishwasher. I'm like, dude, like, give me a minute.
I'm not even done with that yet.
I make him leave the kitchen when I cook because he likes to clean all the time. And I'm grateful, but I used to do the dishes. That was my chore as like a child. Uh-huh. And so I guess I got burnt out.
Burnt out at an early age.
Yeah, I suffered from burnout from doing the dishes. So I no longer do those. Scott does those. And for those of you who don't know, Scott is my husband. And Scott takes out the trash. I've taken out the trash once since we've lived in our new condo, and we've been here for almost 3 years.
What a nice husband.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And the one time I took out the trash, I had a cardboard box in my hand and like a wasp started to chase me like or attack me by the dumpster. And like, I'm waving this big thing, trying to get it away from me. And I was like, this is why I'm never coming back out here.
Okay. Next question. Place you most want to travel to that you haven't been already?
That I haven't been already. That's hard. Okay. Just one?
Just one. First thing that comes to your mind.
Okay. First thing that comes to my mind is Banff in Canada. That is on my list. It appears to be beautiful. And if you can take me anywhere where there's mountains and water and blue sky, I'm game.
If you were home on a rainy Sunday afternoon or snowy Sunday afternoon in Chicago, what movie would you most want to see on television?
Right now, I've really wanted to watch Practical Magic, which is one of my favorite movies.
I love that movie too. Yeah, I didn't know this about you, so I'm glad I just learned that.
Practical Magic or Steel Magnolias, I'm not turning the channel.
Would you rather have unlimited sushi for life or unlimited tacos for life? I knew this one would get you.
I'm going to go tacos.
Because there's all different kinds of tacos. There's like breakfast tacos. There's like pork, veggie, chicken, all different kinds.
You sound like that character in Forrest Gump when he talks about all the. Oh, it's him. It's Forrest Gump when he talks about all the different types of shrimp.
I'm just here to entertain. Okay, what is the last app that you downloaded? I hope it's something good.
It's not. The story is good. I downloaded, or at least it makes me laugh. I downloaded Instacart because every time Scott goes to Jewel and I say, can you please get me? He's like, do you want anything? I was like, yeah, dairy-free pizza. And he's like, okay. And 3 times he's come back and he's like, it's not there. So I downloaded the Instacart app to see if I can order it and prove him wrong. And it was really heartbreaking, but he is right. They do not have it. I was so mad. I don't even think I told him that I did that. I was just like, oh, they don't have anything I want. I'm good.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Okay, what's your favorite drink?
Old fashioned.
I knew you were going to say something alcoholic, but what if it's not alcoholic?
I don't understand the question. Water?
Like some people might say iced tea, or I don't know. I mean,
no, an old fashioned. All I drink is water all day. Like I don't drink anything. I don't drink any of like, that's it. Like I honestly, the only drink I have when I'm not drinking is water.
That's the same as me. So we're like the same person when it comes to that.
I don't know if that's an age thing, but like, I don't really like any. Every now and then I'll have a sip of Scotch Sprite.
Okay. If you could have an unlimited supply of one thing, what would it be?
I mean, I want to say tampons because I hate buying them, but
I hate that too.
It's just, but that seems like a waste. An unlimited supply of one thing.
Mm-hmm.
this is like pressure. This is hard.
Now you know how your guests feel.
I think we should use this question. Unlimited thing. I honestly, nothing is popping into my mind. I'm going to say, is it one thing or is it just like, can I say like food, groceries?
I mean, you can, but that answer is a little boring.
I just want to have my basic needs taken care of. If I can have one unlimited thing, it would just be, this is going to sound crazy, but cars. Scott and I share a car and I'm sick of it because COVID has messed things up. We thought we take lifts everywhere, but I would say cars, luxury cars.
You're so bougie.
I sure am.
Who gives you courage to try new things?
I mean, a lot of it comes from within, right? Like when you get to that point of trying it, it's got to be you and it's got to come from you. But I would say that all that buildup that's inside of you to get the courage to go, I would say, honestly, it's women. I know this is what I do for a living, but it's really women who work in sports. Let me make it general. It is women who go out there and chase their dreams and like do the hard work and, you know, go through things that you don't necessarily see on social media and things that you don't necessarily know about. But if you're, for example, an entrepreneur, I know what someone's going through. Like a friend just started her own agency, marketing agency, and she was an SVP at a PR firm. So she just finally left and started her own thing. So like those sort of things, like it's like a deposit. Every time I see somebody do those things, I don't think I realize it at the time. But when it comes time to do something, I don't think of all those people, but I think that's why I have the courage. And then I think the icing on the cake is my parents.
Your parents sound pretty awesome. You've talked about them before. So I would just like to throw that out there.
They are really cool. I really wish they were closer. They're in Boston. They are very cool.
All right. Last and final question. Finish the sentence. The future of women working in sports is.
I feel like I cheat because I know everybody's answers. The future of women working in sports is, I'll say it different. There is no stopping women when it comes to working in sports. Everyone is on a mission. And for the women that I talk to, it's not so much, yes, they want to make a difference and they want to open more doors for more women and you know, turn around and pull people along with them. And I love that. But I also think that their determination, it's unbelievable. And it's not like they're like, I'm going to go get this job because I want to prove to men we can do it. No, I want to get this job because I am amazing at what I do. I am experienced and Jahaan is telling me so. No, but like, do you know what I mean? They have good cheerleaders, you know, in their court. And I think that I would say it's unstoppable.
I love that answer.
I came up with that on the fly.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you. It's been so fun to edit your 99 episodes before this one, and I can't wait for more. So congratulations to you for deciding to do this, sticking with it, and offering such great content and guests for people to listen to for free.
Yes, I love giving away free content. It helps everybody. Everyone can get a part of this. You don't have to work with me to get advice on what to do as a woman in sports.
Do you have any last words before we end this podcast?
Guys, it sounds so formal. Just so you know, like the podcast is still going on past 100. She made it seem very like final. 100 episodes is incredible. There's so many more to come. I'm already thinking about what's next. So I'm happy to celebrate the 100. I will say this. Thank you to everybody who listens. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I understand how it's difficult to carve out 45 minutes, an hour, you know, when there's so much out there. So the fact that you guys come back week after week, I appreciate that. And that tells me you guys want more content. So as long as you guys keep showing up, I will keep showing up and deliver the content.
And I would ask you how people can find you, but it's already in the show notes. So look there.
Look there. It's all in the show notes. I will say this, though. I do love to hear from you. Even if you just want to tell me a story about something, like the woman I talked about who's in government, she just reached out, loves it. And if you want to talk about what it would look like to work together. I know that career coaches aren't always something that everyone has a therapist, but not everybody has a career coach. So it may not be as mainstream in the director, manager level. You always hear about executives having executive coaches. So if you want to talk about what it looks like, I'm totally open to that. All of my calls are pressure free. You can ask any of my past clients. You can talk to people who didn't work with me because they just, couldn't for whatever reason. It's pressure free. So we can talk it out and talk about what it would look like.
And coming from someone who has used your expertise, and I've sat on calls with you, trying to help me figure out which job to take between two jobs. And you were so helpful to me on things like that. And again, I'm not a woman working in sports anymore. So your expertise goes for all women and anyone, really.
It goes for anyone, no matter how you identify. It goes for everybody.
So thank you for helping me. And thank you for letting me be a part of this podcast.
Thank you for being such a fabulous editor and co-producer. This podcast would not exist if you weren't a part of it.
Well, thank you. And cheers to 100 episodes.
Cheers.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.